How do you decide which drills and which skill development activities to use for individual swimmers? Hi everyone, Andrew here, helping you help your swimmers get faster. I was recently asked about my process for selecting individual drills for individual swimmers. And that's what we're going to talk about today. It's a big topic and a challenging one. Not only do we have to figure out which drills are going to be most effective for individual swimmers, we have to figure out how to make it work within the context of a group training environment. Even if we find the right drills, it can't be a free-for-all. So our decisions need to meet two demands. They need to make sure that swimmers can improve, and they need to make sure that they can do so within a group environment. Here's how I handle it. The first thing I do is start with what everyone needs. So what skills do all swimmers need to improve? They need to improve the amount of propulsion they create, they need to reduce the amount of drag they create, and they need to optimize their timing. In all swimmers, these skills can never be too good, so it makes sense to organize our training plan and our skill development plan around these key skills. And since I know these skills need to be improved, I can create a specific plan that's designed to improve those skills. Not only does this ensure that the right skills are developed, it minimizes the need for individualization because everyone needs to improve all three of these skills. That keeps the process simple and it keeps it aligned between different individuals. So rather than starting with what the individual needs, I start with what the group needs and try to take care of most of the skills that almost every swimmer will have to develop. And in that way, everyone is working on the same skills in similar ways, which is going to make managing a training session much easier. Then, once I know what the key skills I need to improve, I identify the key strategies that I'm going to use to improve those skills. These strategies work for improving the key skills, and they generally work for all swimmers. That's important because, again, we can start using strategies that will be effective for everyone, and that makes managing the practice a lot easier. Let's take improving propulsion as an example. I found that using different combinations of stroke counts, resistance, hand postures, and specific drills can be really effective for improving propulsion across all of the strokes. And when you want to focus on the arms, you take away the legs, and if you want to focus on the legs, you can take away or minimize the impact of the arms. These strategies are all effective for helping swimmers learn to create more propulsion. And so all swimmers can use them, and they can all use them at the same time. And we don't have to be specific with trying to figure out what to do with certain individuals because we're already using the most effective strategies to improve the key skills. And in terms of drills, there tend to be 2 to 3 drills per stroke that are really effective for increasing propulsion, and I tend to use those with all of the swimmers. I'm not necessarily making changes on an individual level. I'm just having everyone use those key drills because they tend to be really effective for everyone. So by using these basic strategies to improve the key skills, I'm taking care of much of the skill development process without having to yet make any individual considerations because I'm focusing on skills that everyone needs to improve, and I'm using strategies that tend to work really, really well for improving those key skills. For the vast majority of swimmers, that's going to take care of 90 to 95% of the skill development process without having to make any sort of individual consideration. While we do want to make individual considerations when we have to, if we can avoid it, it's going to make running training and running practice a whole lot simpler. So I try to avoid that and try to delay that as much as possible. Once the basic framework's in place, then I can start to make modifications or changes for individual swimmers as needed. The simplest way to do so is to emphasize certain strategies that tend to work well for individual swimmers. Sticking with the propulsion example, let's say that pulling tends to really help a certain swimmer. Well, in that case, I can just have them do more of their volume, more of their work with a pull buoy instead of just regular swimming. That way, I can individualize what they're doing without disrupting the flow of practice. Or let's say swimming with a tennis ball tends to really help them. Same thing, I could just have them do a little bit more work with the tennis ball as opposed to just swimming with open hands. And again, maybe a specific type of stroke count work tends to really benefit them. And in that way, I can just have them add or change or modify their stroke counts on an as needed basis. And again, I can do that without disrupting what everyone else is doing. I can just make that small modification within the set that I've already designed. Once I learn the individual needs, once I learn the individual characteristics, once I learn the individual learning styles, that's when I can start to make these modifications. And at first, it's a pretty reactive process. I have to see what they're doing, I have to see what tends to help them, and I have to have a conversation with them in terms of what's really benefiting them, and then I choose to do more of those activities, again, within the basic framework of what we're doing. At the same time, sometimes I see specific problems and I know that certain drills, certain strategies are going to be really effective for solving that problem. And in that case, I'll just have them make that adjustment before waiting to see what happens. Let's say a swimmer is constantly dropping their wrist, letting it break when they pull through the water. In that case, I know that using pinch paddles is going to be a really effective tool because it forces them to be really stiff with the wrist and lock the wrist when they're pulling, and they learn how to create that strength and create that stability. That's an example where a specific intervention is going to solve a specific problem. And with that specific example, using pinch paddles, that's a strategy that I'll use anyway, but for a given individual, I may use it more often, knowing that they have a specific problem that needs to be improved. As another example, they may be struggling to create propulsion because they're taking way too many strokes. And for that individual, I just may have them use stroke counts more often than I would with other individuals that don't have that same problem. And as a third example, I might see a swimmer that's performing a lot of lateral motions when they pull. There's a lot of sculling. In that case, I may have them use drills more often where they're focused on really backwards and really direct force application to try to get rid of those lateral motions. So when I see specific issues with swimmers and I have a pretty good sense that it's not going to be cleaned up with the general strategies, they need something more specific, I'll give them something more specific to do. Usually, it's just a small adjustment like the examples I just gave you, and they can be easily implemented within the context of whatever set that they're doing. And again, if it's a propulsion problem, I'm only going to use a propulsion solution when we're working on propulsion. And so that way, everyone's still working on the same thing, but different individuals may be doing different versions of that same task in order to get a little bit more specific for what they need. So they're all doing the same set, but small adjustments can be quickly and easily made. And if there's already specific drill work built into the set, I can just make adjustments in terms of the drills that they're doing in order to help them achieve their goals based upon what they need. So I really try to avoid having to select specific drills for specific individuals as much as possible by focusing on the key skills and using the most effective strategies for addressing those skills. Everyone needs to improve in the major skill areas, and that helps keep it simple. I then choose the most effective strategies to help swimmers learn these skills. That ensures everyone's getting exposed to the best way to improve their skills. And then if appropriate, I may have some swimmers perform more or less of certain activities if they really tend to benefit from those activities. Finally, I may look at other extra options to place a little bit more emphasis on a given area or a given skill. And this might include certain drills. However, I try to keep the number of drills that I use really small so it's easy to integrate within a practice session. So rather than starting with a blank slate of what should a swimmer work on to improve, I try to get as much skill development done as a group using the most effective options, working on the most important skills. When you have a really good overall plan for developing skills, when you're using really effective options to facilitate that plan, it usually only takes a couple small adjustments on an individual basis to create a major impact. A different drill, a different training aid, or another small adjustment can make a huge difference. Based upon the background of that overall skill development plan, I'm then able to individualize for certain swimmers to solve specific problems. Hope that was helpful, and as always, keep it simple.